Hey, it's Roy Newgate, and I'm back reviewing One Piece Chapter 1009, and this chapter was absolutely insane. There is a lot to discuss and unpack in this one, and even now, days later, I'm still blown away by what I've read. But before we get to all of that, if you are a returning viewer, or if you generally enjoy One Piece content like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to stay posted on all of my uploads. With that aside, let's get right into it. The chapter starts off at the castle interior where the Scabbards come face to face with Orochi, which was perhaps an inevitable encounter. Fukuro mentions to Orochi that the Scabbards are unaware that Orochi has already died once today. Now, what we're left to wonder about is what exactly this means for Orochi. His devil fruit is based on the Yamata no Orochi, but based on mythology, that creature isn't meant to have multiple lives. One that does, though, is the Hydra, and it has similarities to the Yamata no Orochi. So my thinking here is that Oda perhaps used elements from both of them to give Orochi his devil fruit powers. And mythical Zoans typically have a special ability that sets them apart from other fruits. It also wouldn't make sense for him to have the fruit for no reason, so this is likely why he was granted the fruit's power. Fukuro instructs Orochi to leave the area and let him handle the Scabbards, but Orochi refuses, saying that there is nowhere to run, and also adding that they should be weakened enough for him to fight them. He transforms immediately after, but the Scabbards quickly cut off his remaining heads. I've seen some people say that only 6 were cut, and so he may still be alive, since that will bring the total down to 1 at this point, and that each head may count for 1 life. It's hard to tell from the panel, but that may easily be the case. And admittedly, I was under the impression that Orochi was gone for good when Kaido took his head off, prior to this chapter. Though over time it did hit me how often Oda uses fake out deaths to set something up later. And there's also the fact that we have Ame no Habakiri, which has yet to serve its purpose. It wouldn't make any sense for it to be highlighted in its introduction alongside Enma for it to have absolutely no utility. This gets into the concept of Chekhov's gun, in which every element of the story should contribute and have a concrete narrative function. And so Ame no Habakiri's narrative function should be to kill Orochi at this point. I mean, it's pretty simple. The sword is known as the Snake Slayer. Orochi's a snake. Not too much to it. And if we're going by the idea that Orochi has 1 life left, the main candidates to finish him off are Hiyori and Momo. Maybe both at the same time or either one separately. Hiyori said she wished she could kill him herself, and this may be her chance if the opportunity presents itself, and she's placed there to finish the job. And Momo himself, though appearing very weak, has been shown training and is getting better with his devil fruit, which has to amount to something in the end. We may even see Orochi saved for later for a public execution by the two after the emperors are defeated. It will be a great showing for the future shogun of Wano, and he'd be contributing in the best way that he can at this point. We move on to the rooftop, where Big Mom brings up the idea of using a combined attack with Kaido, which shows us that they're not pulling any punches at this point and are set to go all out. After that, Kid asks Law why he doesn't just use his ability to move one of the two away from the fight. I'm sure this was on everyone's mind because it's definitely the most practical idea, so if he hasn't done it yet, there has to be a reason, and that reason is that the strength of their haki prohibits them from being moved. This was never made explicitly clear, though, because it was only ever implied that his cutting ability was negated by his strong haki. Actually, not quite, because Smoker did say in Punk Hazard that you had to have strong haki to withstand the effects of his room, so that could apply to all of his abilities when his room is up, and not just the cutting ability. And altogether, it makes sense that Law can't just do as he pleases, and that's because his power needs checks and balances that prevents him from easily disposing of any individual that he comes across. Because if that weren't the case, he could simply just move both of them to the sea and the arc would be over immediately with no effort by the Alliance side. Now, back in Dressrosa, it was heavily implied that Doflamingo had superior haki, and that's why the severing powers would not work. Yet Law was still able to move him. I think this was due to the fact that he was distracted, and you might have to consciously be using haki to counter his fruit's abilities in some cases. Cases like Big Mom and Kaido may be completely different because of how massive the gap in haki is. So there's likely never a weak point. This whole thing though makes me think that other seemingly broken fruits should have the same counter. A few examples would be the ones belonging to Sugar and Bonnie. If this haki counter isn't in place, Sugar would be able to turn any individual into a toy, and Bonnie would be able to age anyone she comes across. We see Big Mom and Kaido prepare for their attack, reminiscent of Dory and Bragi when they used the Elbaf Spear. It also looks like Luffy peered into the future and sees what they're preparing for the Nova, as he warns them that something big is coming. Killer even points out that they won't be able to dodge, so it's obvious that this attack is so fast and massive that there really is no room for escape for them. And this is when Zoro immediately moves ahead of the rest of them and blocks this combined Yonko attack. And this whole scene is absolutely unprecedented. I mean, I've been going over what happened in my head the last few days and it still doesn't even seem real. Honestly, I don't even think fan fiction could come up with something like this. This is Roro Noah Zoro, blocking the single most powerful attack in the series. And of course, there's no debate there. This is the strongest attack we have seen by far. We see how alarmed the two emperors are by Zoro blocking because you'd figure this attack would be strong enough to wipe out all of them in one shot. And you can even see that the block of the attack created a massive shockwave that was almost as big as the entire island itself, which just shows how potent it was and the amount of damage it would have done if it wasn't stopped. But there's also a few other elements I wanted to get into when it comes to how Zoro was able to stop this attack. The fact is, he did not have any time to prepare because of how fast it was coming, so we don't really have the best idea of how he would have fared if he did. Because you can imagine he would have done slightly better if he was given enough time to use something like Nigiri to amp his physical power, or even Ashura, because it's been proven in the past that it buffs his defenses. I'm not saying that he would have completely halted it or anything like that, because that's insane, but he would have undoubtedly fared better and bought even more time. Besides that though, we did see that the attack was beginning to overwhelm him, and he definitely felt the effects. The fact that he was able to fight through it and survive shows that his durability is just outright otherworldly. Most people would have been eviscerated on contact. This goes back to when Nami called Zoro the toughest man on the crew. And if nothing happened didn't convince you that his durability was at the top of the crew, this certainly should have done it. But moving on from this, we see that Zoro was able to buy enough time for Law to move everyone out of harm's way before the attack took them all out. We see that Zoro is on the ground as the attack did a lot of damage, and Law even asks if he's still alive. Now, we also see Kaido pointing out that he can sense the voices of the supernova and they haven't been wiped out. I'm wondering in what context voices is used here, but I think this is meant to imply that Kaido is using the voice of all things. Shortly after, we see that Luffy has rushed to attack Kaido and he avoids the attack. And Luffy points it out because he knows it can hurt him now. I figure at this point Kaido isn't testing them anymore and isn't just going to sit around and take the full force of their attacks if he can do something about it. One thing I'm wondering about though is the whole thing with Luffy staying in base. Reason being that I'm not sure if this is supposed to count as a 10-minute cooldown period since he's not supposed to be able to use Haki at all, let alone Gear 4. It could be that his Haki has not returned fully and he's waiting for the right moment to get back into the form. As Kaido dodges Luffy's attack, he hits him with a series of combo attacks. First, a direct hit with his club, and Luffy has his armament defenses up, but we can still see he took a lot of damage because his hands are pulsating. But Kaido continues with a blast from his mouth that sends Luffy away. And then he ultimately does a completely new attack called Conqueror of the 3000 Worlds, Ragnarok. And I found it interesting because it's very similar to one of Zoro's attacks, 3000 Worlds, and even that has a similar name. The name of the attack is a reference to the Buddhist hell as well, so it's especially fitting when Kaido's presence has been so often linked to hell throughout the arc. We see that Luffy took this attack head on and he doesn't even yell out or anything, so I think this may lead to him being sidelined for a bit in the next chapter as he tries to recover. Because these attacks by Kaido are nothing to scoff at. He really went all out in an attempt to put Luffy down for good. From what we get in the next few panels, I think it's safe to assume Law put together a plan for the Nova to take down Big Mom off panel. They knew the key to beating her was to disarm her and take away her strongest homies. Kid and Law started off with Kid making a box for Zeus as Law teleports him inside of the box. Zoro and Killer follow it up by taking on Napoleon and Prometheus. Zoro immediately slashes through Prometheus and knocks Big Mom off in the process, as Killer tries to slice through Napoleon. And you can see the fear in the homies' eyes as they're being separated from Big Mom. Zoro brings back an attack we only saw once back in Fishman Island as he keeps up the pressure on Prometheus so that he doesn't have enough time to reform. Big Mom assumes nothing has changed by losing her homies and proceeds to attack Kid directly. He takes punches to the face, but then he grabs her with his metal and repels her into the air. And this was a great showing for Kid. I personally have been underwhelmed by him prior to this, but I think he really maximized his usefulness in this chapter. Subsequent to Kid's move, Law sends a huge boulder after her, and it sends her hurtling down towards the sea. And by this point, the Nova had successfully removed Big Mom from the battle, and moved the odds a little bit closer to their favor. I see a lot of talk about how this is going to lead back to the Amnesia plot line after she hits the bottom, and talks of her aligning with them again, but to me it doesn't make any sense. We already had that happen prior, and I don't see Oda senselessly reintroducing it at a point in which she should still be a force that they're working against. There's also talks of her going to Albath, but that's even more wild to me because it would be like she came to Wano for no reason. This is supposed to be the battle against the Emperors of the Sea, and her getting removed and saved for a subsequent arc wouldn't really make any sense at all either. And we've already had her for 2 straight arcs, so she should meet her end here. Now, in the last panel, we also see Zoro coughing up blood, so although he was able to effectively join the team attack against Big Mom, The effects of taking on the ocean sovereignty from earlier are beginning to show. But I'm not worried about him at all. It's not like he's gonna drop out from the battle. This is who he is. He is in his element when he's taking on these sorts of hardships. I will say though, I think that him and Luffy will be sidelined for a short time as they took on an insane amount of damage this chapter. I think this will lead to a 3-on-1 as Killer, Law, and Kid take on Kaido for some time before Big Mom returns to the top, so they should all get a good amount of time to shine. They're all in much better condition, and we don't even know the full extent of the attacks that Luffy took earlier. That's it for this review, but tell me what you thought of the chapter. What were your favorite moments, and what do you think is going to happen in 1010? Also, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell for post notifications on all of my uploads.